Hello everyone, welcome to GNU according to CD, that is Government of National Unity. So guys, as you already know that I do go through the online newspapers and I came across this article that was dropped on the 13th of September 2024 regarding US backs two permanent seats for African nations on the United Nations Security Council. I think it's United Nations Security Council. Anyways, the article continues to say this article is from AP World News. So, this is what it says. United Nations, the United States announced on Thursday that it will support the addition of two new permanent seats for African countries on the powerful United Nations Security Council and a first ever non permanent seat for a small island developing nation. So, as some of you may know, that the United Nations Security Council, it is the highest decision-making body in the UN, and Africa was never a part of the Security Council, only by invitation, if I stand corrected. And South Africa has served on the Security Council before. I think it had a non-permanent seat, and then I think around 2003 or so, it invited along Nigeria, I think, and Senegal. I also stand corrected there. And Africa has been fighting for permanent seats on the Security Council of the United Nations, and they also wanted veto rights for that particular endeavor. And now the United States will be backing two African countries and one non permanent developing island nation to be serving on the UN Security Council. Now, it's the veto right where I'm having a bit of a problem because that's where the power is. We can't just be, how do you call this? Yes, man, yes, sir, yes, madam, whatever the case might be. Or in order for us to pass an agenda, we have to go through Russia and China, who do have a veto right, by the way, in the Security Council. I don't know. Let's continue with the article. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Thomas Greenfield, made the announcement in a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations, calling it a follow-up to President Joe Biden's announcement. Let's start this again. I'm so sorry. It's early in the morning. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, made the announcement in a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations, calling it a follow up to the US President Joe Biden's announcement 2 years ago that the US supports expanding the 15-member body. While Africa has three non permanent seats on the Security Council, that doesn't allow African countries to deliver full benefit of their knowledge and voices, she said. That is why, in addition to non permanent membership for African countries, the United Nations supports creating two permanent seats for Africa on the Council, Thomas Greenfield said. It's what our African partners seek, and it's what we believe is just. However, Thomas Greenfield later said Washington opposes giving veto power to the African countries that would hold two permanent seats because the veto makes the Security Council's work dysfunctional. Okay, I think this is my suspicion. This is my suspicion. I think one of the African countries that are going to have a permanent seat is South Africa. And the reason why I'm saying South Africa is because of South Africa's partnership in the BRICS nation, where you already have two countries that have veto rights in the in the Security Council, which is China and Russia. And maybe the United States is also trying to buy South Africa's favor as well. That if ever comes a time in the United Nations Security Council where they have to take a very dismal decision, South Africa will not vote because we don't have veto right, but will support them in the Security Council versus supporting the BRICS partners, which I don't think that's gonna work because why would you betray your economic partners like the BRICS nations that are in the Security Council with the veto right? Don't you think that it will work better for South Africa if it supported the BRICS nation that have veto right in the Security Council? But I just think this is a strategy by the United States, especially aimed at South Africa, because I think South Africa is going to be one of the countries that are going to hold that permanent seat. I suspect that the second country that might hold the second seat between Senegal as well as either Kenya or Rwanda, but I suspect Rwanda if it's not Senegal. We'll see. We'll definitely see. And the island nation that is developing, I think it's either going to be Mauritius, if not the Seychelles. That those are just my suspicions, but we'll see as things develop. Let's continue with the article. That view shows the limits in the amount of power that Washington wants to give to any other country. While Security Council resolutions are legally binding, they are often ignored by targeted countries. I mean, like what happened in 2001 with Iraq. Virtually all countries agree that nearly 8 decades after the United Nations was established in the wake of World War II, the Security Council should be expanded to reflect the world in the 21st century and include more voices. But the central question and the biggest disagreement remains how to do it. And the irony about the United Nations, South Africa is one of the co founders of this establishment, in case you did not know. South Africa did also add a voice, even though the person or people that added something into the establishment of the United Nations was an apartheid leader. I can't remember. I think it was what was that? Oh, Jan Smart, uh, Christian Jan Smart. Yeah, I think he's one of the co-founders of the United Nations. And it's quite ironic that South Africa doesn't hold a permanent seat in the Security Council as co founders. And it's even more shocking that Washington, D.C. doesn't want any of the African countries to have veto rights, even though those what I call binding decisions that they take can be overridden by some powerful nation like the United States, as they believe they are a powerful nation. Hence, we had 2001 Iraq and Afghanistan type of situation. But, anyways, the article continues to say the Security Council, which is charged with maintaining international peace and security, has not changed from its 1945 configuration. 10 non permanent members from all regions of the world elected for 2 year terms without veto power, and 5 countries that were dominant powers at the end of World War II are permanent members with veto powers: the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France. Which, all, anyways, some of them are just your NATO alliances, which is quite interesting. Russia, China, also being part of the BRICS, and then you have the other ones being part of the NATO nations. Anyways, Russia's veto power, for instance, has stymied any council. Is it stymied? What the hell? I had never seen this word before in my life. Stymied. Any council action on the war in Ukraine, and US support for its ally Israel has limited the council's response to the war in Gaza. Attempts to reform the council to reflect the changing world began in 1979. In 2005, world leaders called for the council to be more broadly representative efficient, and transparent. That year, the General Assembly, which must approve any council reforms, shelved three resolutions to expand its membership, a reflection of deep divisions that have continued until today. In September 2022, Biden called for increasing the number of both permanent and non permanent members, including permanent seats for those nations we've long supported and permanent seats for countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Oh, okay, so it's going to be the Caribbean, not in Africa. The United States has long supported permanent seats for Germany, Japan, and India. And as you know, India is also part of the BRICS nation. Hey, this is going to be interesting. Thomas Greenfield made no mention of Biden's other pledge about permanent seats for countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. That's because they're not part of the BRICS nations, I'm telling you. But a senior U.S. administration official who spoke on condition of anonymity to brief reporters ahead of the announcement said the U.S. still supports permanent seats for Latin America and the Caribbean plus Africa. Responding to countries arguing that it's time for the UN to look beyond just regional representation, the US ambassador also announced that the United States is supporting the creation of an additional rotating seat for small island developing countries. These 39 states are not a monolith. They are home to 65 million people across over 1,000 islands, he said. Oh, okay. But each has critical insights on a range of international peace and security issues, including notably the impact of climate change. Thomas Greenfield said the United States plans to actually put our principles on paper and draft a resolution to reform the council. Some countries argue that before negotiating resolution, all 193 member states need to be in agreement about what a reformed council should look like, she said. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And the reality is this: no amount of conversation will ever get us to a place of total consensus on this issue, Thomas Greenfield said. This is reported by Jennifer Peltz, contributed from New York on this online newspaper AP. Man, this is going to be very interesting politics in the next coming few months because Joe Biden, as we all know, that the United States it is headed for its general elections in November. So whoever is going to be the president of the United States, let's hear if they are going to carry this all the way through. But if it's a resolutions of Washington, D.C., and then I suppose the next president is bound by this decision to have two African nations holding permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council without veto rights. It's the veto right part that I'm a little bit crushed about, but I think the strategy here is to soften South Africa because I believe South Africa is going to be one of the two countries. And I still suspect that Senegal, if it's not Senegal, is going to be Rwanda or Kenya that is going to be given the second permanent seat in the Security Council. Hey guys, let's see how it all goes because this world really does need African input. However, I would have loved it if we also held the power to vote rather than just being yes sirs, yes ma'am, and all that stuff that's going to be going on there. And of course, if India is added, then you have how many BRICS nations? You have Russia, South Africa, China, and India. If India indeed is a non-permanent member, I think they will be rotating every other two. I mean, every 2 years or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it all goes. So I thought, let me drop this interesting news piece to you. If you are interested in this type of politics, global politics, let me put it that way. I'm quite interested in such things. Anyways, it's always been something that I'm interested since I was a teenager, I suppose. Anyways, I don't know. Do what you will with this information. It would be nice to have a discussion on it. Great. Bye.